Times are tough for our local authorities, not least for Newcastle City Council. It needs to save £100 million over the next 3 years, and services like the Citizens Advice Bureau will bear the brunt of these cuts. The Newcastle branch, which has been helping Tynesiders since 1939, could be forced to close its doors to those in need because of proposed cuts to its core funding.
The problem we've got at the moment is the council's reducing our funding by 60% for the next year, and then 100% the year after that. So basically, this time next year, we're looking at a gap of £260,000, which is a huge gap. And when we fully appreciate the council's strapped for cash, really is difficult. But that means, effectively, that puts a big question mark over whether we can stay open. So the trustees have said that if we can't secure funding to match that gap, then we'll probably look at closure towards the end of this year.
Newcastle Citizens Advice helps more than 10,000 people every year who are struggling with debt, rent arrears and even domestic abuse. Other bureaus in Gateshead and Northumberland currently receive more council funding than Newcastle, and their funding will stay in place.
The worry for them, though, across in North Tyneside, Gateshead, Northumberland, is that people who usually would come here will go to them, and they're not going to be able to cope with that at all. And they're not funded to do that either, because why should North Tyneside Council fund something that Newcastle Council thinks isn't worth funding? So there's a bit of anxiety right across the country, actually, because if it goes ahead, this could be the only city without a CAB, which is unthinkable, really.
Well, the council says millions of pounds has been given to the voluntary and community sector through their Newcastle Fund, and while it recognises the invaluable work that Newcastle's Citizens Advice does in the city, government cuts are now so severe that they're having to consider reducing the spending. Councillor Joyce McCartney, Deputy Leader of Newcastle City Council, said in a statement to Bulletin, "We recognise that any cut in funding to Citizens Advice Newcastle will be challenging for them, but we will still be giving them £114,000 in 2016-17, which we hope will enable them to continue at least some of their invaluable work while they search for alternative sources of funding." A petition has been launched before the council makes a final decision on the 2nd of March. So do you think if you garner enough support then the council might reconsider its budget proposals?
Well, that's what we're asking for. We appreciate the council's in a dire situation funding, and we also know that the chances of getting the whole money reinstated, that's probably not going to happen. But what we're trying to do is reach a situation where at least we can keep going for 2 years in order that we can turn things round, find cheaper premises, get these funding bids together, do all sorts of creative things to make us able to be sustainable into the future. So we're not asking for the whole money to be reinstated, but we need to kind of break even. So we're discussing that with the council now about what are the absolute rock bottom costs, just to tide us over, to give us that breathing space to find another way of running things.
Citizens Advice Newcastle is well aware of the enormous strain on the City Council, but raising funds elsewhere, like the council have suggested, they say is simply not an option. Zoe Muldoon, Maid and Tyne and Weir, Newcastle.